your one-stop Honda shop. Jeff, let's start with DAmico Ryans. Houston gives the former Niners defensive coordinator a 6-year deal. Your thoughts on that contract? Your thoughts on that hire?
I think it's great. I mean, obviously, you should always be skeptical of what's going to happen in Houston with the Texans. And coming off of back-to-back one-and-dones, just the third team to ever, or the third time that's happened since 1970. So he should be skeptical. But I think the 6-year contract is a sign of good faith that this is the guy that they want to build their future around. Whereas the previous pair of head coaches, people kind of wondered in real time, are these going to be one-and-dones, or these placeholders, whatever, so on and so forth. If you're the Texans, you have to be over the moon that you got DAmico Ryans for two reasons. Number one, he's got outstanding ability or potential, could be a real star at head coach. And then the other side, it has merit. They need good PR after the last few years, and bringing in a former star player like DAmico with the credentials, I mean, the Texans, again, they should be over the moon.
What do you think? First of all, is the 6 years, is that unusual for a first-time head coach getting his first job in the NFL?
I believe Matt Rule had a 6-year contract.
That didn't end well.
No, it didn't. But, I mean, again, I think that's a win for DAmico, and that's probably something that he worked hard to negotiate. He and his agent worked hard to negotiate because, again, like if you go to Houston on a 4-year contract, you're going to be looking over your shoulder every year, especially while you're rebuilding. I mean, they could have the last two coaches, I don't think deserve to get fired. And they did, because everything in Houston for a few years has been a mess. So if you're DAmico, you've got to, again, you probably fought hard to get that 6-year deal because it's going to be fully guaranteed. And you need every incentive in the world to have some peace of mind.
Jeff Howe from The Athletic is with us. Jeff, the other big news in the NFL today, Sean Payton. The trade has been completed. He heads to Denver. Is this the best possible scenario for Russell Wilson? And do you think Wilson will actually accept and embrace Sean Payton?
Well, if he doesn't, he's going to be out of the league soon. And, I mean, I think it's such a small sample size, but I think we've talked about it recently. Russell Wilson did play better over the last couple of games after Nathaniel Hackett was fired. So is there reason to believe that Hackett was, bringing Wilson down? I mean, of course, there's going to be two sides to this. There's no perfect answer. You're never going to say, well, one side deserves 100% of the blame or even 90% of the blame. It's closer to somewhere in the middle. But you've got a brilliant offensive mind in Sean Payton, who had to really believe in the potential of turning Wilson around. Now, granted, coaches always believe that they can get the best out of every player. So there is that part of it. But Sean Payton was going to be incredibly selective with this next job, whether it was going to be this cycle or spinning it forward another year. So that tells me that he thinks that he can salvage Russell Wilson. And it's a price. It's a huge price to pay. I think now the Broncos gave up in order to acquire Wilson and then Sean Payton, their first 2 picks in 3 consecutive drafts. And that you just kind of compare it to, like, you look at an organization that has had so much, that has struggled so much to figure out a good offensive plan since Peyton Manning started to go downhill and ultimately retired. And think about the resources that they've invested, first in Wilson and Hackett, and now with Sean Payton. And I just kind of was thinking about, like, compare that to the 49ers, who just went, 7 or 8-0 before the final loss with the very last pick in the draft at quarterback. So the Broncos have invested significantly to try to salvage this thing. And if it doesn't work, there's going to be a lot of people who are out of jobs.
You brought up the 49ers and the quarterback situation, and we'd be remiss to not ask you about that before we let you go, Jeff Howe of The Athletic. We talked with Matt Mayoko of NBC Sports California last hour, and he said that before the injury, Brock Purdy had done enough in the eyes of most people within the 49ers organization to get the starting job going into next year. How much do you think that changes now? And what possibilities do you think are on the table for the 49ers at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agreed there that if with the fortune of good health, this was going to be Brock Purdy's team going into next season. This was an absolute worst case scenario because of the stage of his career, everything that he was able to accomplish on the fly, picking up not just midseason, basically the final quarter of the season, and playing as well as he did, but the chance to go into the offseason and to have that 9-week offseason workout program to build into training camp, that would have been massive for a guy going into his second year. And to have that all wiped out is tough. So now you look at Trey Lance, and the door just swung big time open for him to try to get a leg up in this competition. Now, I think Kyle Shanahan is a good enough coach to know that this was going to be somewhat of an open competition anyway, obviously giving the benefit of the doubt to Brock Purdy. But if Trey Lance comes out and has a great 9-week offseason workout program, you go into training camp, with maybe some uncertainty with the elbow for Purdy, and you probably have to make this much more of an open competition.
Jeff Howe from The Athletic is on the Folsom Lake Honda hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. Jeff, there was a report out today saying that people close to Tom Brady believe he is going to come back. I think you said the same thing after the season was over. He's too competitive of a guy. Niners fans are watching Brady, wondering if this could actually come together. If you were a betting man, Brady comes back, where does he end up? Tampa, Vegas, the Niners, or none of the above?
I'm still not backing off the the Raiders. I think that it's made way too much sense for too long. And I know if you're the 49ers, I totally get the argument of this is a championship caliber roster. As long as you get some consistent quarterback play, like this is a team that could absolutely win the Super Bowl next year. And with all that in mind, I mean, yeah, do you want to go after Tom Brady to increase your odds? That's got to be tempting. I totally get that. But look at what Shanahan just did with this quarterback situation. And if you think that Brock Purdy, now again, he's got more opinions coming, and he's got to hope, and everybody hopes that it's only a 6-month injury. Assuming he's able to go by week 1, if he's able to go to training camp and beat out Trey Lance for that job, then you got to feel like you're on the short list already to win the Super Bowl. So for Brady, I mean, I don't see him going back to Tampa. I think there's been too many changes there. The Raiders just make all the sense in the world. Familiarity with the system, with the people in place, and that's just he can expand his brand. I think there's already been interest in expanding his brand in Vegas. So there's just a lot of factors that come together to make it look like the Raiders are the most likely scenario.
Are we going to see an unprecedented number of starting quarterbacks change teams this offseason, Jeff?
Well, I mean, what was the number last year? The number last year, I feel like, was probably close to like 6. But, you look at Aaron Rodgers, and there's certainly a lot of smoke with him potentially going to the Jets or who knows where. Tom Brady, again, I think is going to change teams. Jimmy Garoppolo would make sense for him to go somewhere else. And Derek Carr, we know, is going to go somewhere else. So then it's like, what happens beyond that? Let's say this time a week ago, I would have said, well, what happens if somebody calls about Trey Lance? Now I think that door is probably shut. If you're the Jets, what happens if somebody calls about Zach Wilson? If you are the Raiders and you lose out on Brady and Garoppolo, do you call the Patriots about Mac Jones? So, I mean, there are certainly possibilities for it to be closer to a quarter of the league, but I think right now you're probably looking at 4.
Jeff, thanks, man. You're great as always. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good week.
You too. There goes Jeff Howe from The Athletic on the Folsom Lake Honda hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one-stop Honda shop. So Jeff says he does not believe